Chapter 242. After standing up from the bed, I stretched. I felt my entire body calm and full of Tao energy. An indescribable sense of comfort enveloped my body. After reaching the perfect acupoint sealing perfection, the Tao energy in the heaven meridians would form a heavenly cycle that would rapidly circulate. As long as I didn't use too much Tao energy at once, I would be able to maintain the abundance of Tao energy in my body at all times. It was said that when a feng shui master was in this realm, they could enter a state of enlightenment at any time. They could absorb the power of the stars into their body and break through to the glory of knowledge realm. Of course, this was only a legend. Other than those great Daoxian experts in history, there were very few rumors of star picking. Especially in recent times, there were no records of it. At that moment, I recalled what Nangong had told me. If I cultivated the dark green power and broke through to glory of knowledge, I would definitely be able to pick stars into my body. The dark green power was already stronger than Tao energy. If I could pick stars and enter glory of knowledge, who knows how much stronger I would be. Just thinking about it made me yearn for it. It was impossible for me to say that I wasn't tempted, but the corresponding threat was too huge. Heaven Master and Earth Master were two completely different realms. At that time, even if my strength exceeded a normal glory of knowledge realm, it would be useless. As long as a Heaven Master wanted to kill me, I wouldn't be able to go against them. I sat on the side of the bed and pondered for a long time. In the end, I sighed and gave up on this unrealistic thought. Since I had reached the perfect acupoint sealing perfection, the next step was to consider glory of knowledge. Based on the rules of the Metaphysics Association, after reaching the perfect acupoint sealing perfection, I had to report to the headquarters. Then I would have to test my talent of the 5 elements and calculate the amount of bright stones needed. Then I would have to wait for the Metaphysics Association to distribute the bright stones. Finally, I had to complete the final step of absorbing the bright stones to break through to glory of knowledge. During this time, the feng shui master couldn't leave the headquarters. This rule wasn't hard to understand. After all, bright stones were too precious. The Metaphysics Association wouldn't let the bright stones in their hands leak out. However, I was still worried about a problem. After the Metaphysics Exchange Conference and the trip to Meizhou, the Liu family would definitely know that I had recovered my strength. They would most likely want to eliminate me to prevent future troubles. If I were to return to the Metaphysics headquarters, I would be so close to the Liu family. The Liu family might get the news and cause some trouble. After thinking for a while, I decided to talk to Yi Pianpian about this matter. If my 5 elemental talent was tested to be of the fire attribute, the old Gramps might not go through the Metaphysics Association and directly give me the fire obsidian stones. That would be great. After we agreed on this matter, I was about to say goodbye to Yi Pianpian. But before I left, I suddenly recalled Yi Pianpian's strange behavior, as well as her strange behavior when she met Yi Morin in the morning. I was a little worried. After hesitating for a moment, I opened my mouth and asked her, "Are you all right today?" I was just asking casually, but who knew that Yi Pianpian would suddenly freeze in place? She stared at me with her big eyes, and 2 sparkling teardrops gushed out of her eyes. I instantly panicked. Ever since I met Yi Pianpian, she had always been arrogant and indifferent. Sometimes she could even be very strong. She had never shown any weakness. Why was she crying for no reason? Chapter 243. I stood there helplessly. I opened my mouth a few times, but I didn't know what to say. I was inexplicably nervous, and my palms were sweating nonstop. I finally let out a sigh of relief after Yi Pianpian lowered her head and wiped away her tears. I wasn't as nervous anymore, but the inexplicable panic in my heart still hadn't subsided. Yi Piampian quickly recovered from her previous emotions. She lifted her head and even smiled at me. In a rare, soft voice, she said to me, "I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me. After arriving at the headquarters, you might not be able to leave for a long time. If you have any matters to attend to, it's best to arrange them in the next few days to avoid any delays." I nodded in response. I was still worried about her, but her calm expression didn't seem fake. After a moment of silence, I wanted to ask her again, but I didn't know what to say. In the end, I could only say, "Then take care of yourself. If you need any help, just come and find me." Yi Piampian nodded at me with a faint smile. After leaving her room, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Yi Piampian was a genius of the Metaphysics Association, and she also held the position of vice president. On the surface, she looked extraordinarily glamorous, but in reality, she was just a little girl about the same age as me. Moreover, after knowing her for so long, I had never heard her talk about her parents. It seemed that she had been with Gramps Lee since she was young, and there was also that mysterious Yi Piaolan who looked exactly like her. Although I didn't know what had happened to her, I could imagine that she must have gone through a lot. Perhaps her cold and arrogant appearance was just a disguise. She would only reveal her inner weakness when she couldn't bear the pressure, just like just now. On the way back, my heart was heavy. When I returned to my room, I was surprised to find that the door was open and the fatty was sitting in my room. Seeing my gloomy expression, the fatty asked me in surprise, "What's wrong?" I rubbed my face and smiled. I changed the topic and asked him why he was here. The fatty was always carefree, so he didn't probe further. He casually threw a small box on the table. "Here, my master told me to bring this to you. He said that you know about it. It's strange. Did you secretly meet with my master these past 2 days?" No, I was also confused. However, I recalled that Nangong had told me this morning that Taoist seizing had made a spirit-locking formation for me. He said that it could lock the true dragon veins, aura. I guessed it was this formation. The fatty was puzzled and asked why his master had specially given me something. I waved my hand to quiet him down. Then I walked over and opened the small wooden box on the table. Fatty was obviously very curious as well. He came over anxiously and stared at it intently. After the box was opened, there were 5 plain white shells that were smaller than a fingernail. Every single one of them was extremely smooth and looked very delicate. Moreover, they carried a strong wave of qi of the way, which could make people feel shocked. In addition, there was also a small piece of paper that was 2 fingers wide, folded together. I didn't see anything strange about the shell, but the fat man screamed in surprise. He stood up from his chair, his face full of disbelief. "What is this shell? Is it a formation?" From the fat man's expression, it was clear that he knew what it was. I hastily asked. The fat man calmed down and didn't answer me. He carefully picked up one of the shells with both hands and carefully examined it with an intoxicated expression. After a while, the fat man finally put the shell down. The intoxicated expression on his face didn't diminish in the slightest. He sighed and said to me, "That's right. This is a formation. Moreover, it's one of the strongest formations of our divination school." Although the divination school wasn't as widespread as the talisman school and the pill cauldron school, in terms of historical inheritance, the divination school could be said to be the strongest of all the Taoist schools. Moreover, the divination school was the best in the divination school. When I heard the fat man say that this was one of the strongest formations of the divination school, my interest was piqued. The fat man turned his head to look at the 5 shells. Then he mysteriously asked me, "Have you heard of the 5 Emperors coins?" 5 Emperors coins. Isn't that a geomancy master's item? Of course, I've heard of it. The 5 Emperors coins were one of the most common items in geomancy. They could ward off evil spirits, bring wealth, and pray for blessings. Since ancient times, Chinese people had the custom of wearing coins to ward off evil spirits, bring wealth, and pray for blessings. The 5 Emperors coins were the coins made by the 5 most prosperous emperors in China. Thus, the 5 Emperors coins gathered the qi of heaven, earth, and people, as well as the qi of more than 100 families. They could suppress evil spirits, bring wealth, strengthen people's will, and resolve distracting thoughts. Moreover, the 5 Emperors coins were divided into the Great 5 Emperors coins and the Small 5 Emperors coins. The Great 5 Emperors coins referred to the Qin Ban Liang, the Han Dynasty's 5 Ba, the Tang Dynasty's Kai Yuan Tong Bao, the Song Dynasty's Song Yuan Tong Bao, and the Ming Dynasty's Yongla Tong Bao. The 5 Emperors coins referred to the Small 5 Emperors coins, Xuanji Tong Bao, Kangxi Tong Bao, Yongjing Tong Bao, Qianlong Tong Bao, and Jiaqing Tong Bao. However, these coins were made of copper coins. So what do they have to do with the 5 shells in front of us? Chapter 244. When the fatty saw me staring at the 5 shells in a daze, he calmed down and asked me, "Third baby, after talking for so long, you still haven't told me why my master gave you such a precious formation." I extended my hand and took the jade bracelet off my neck. I asked the fatty, "Do you remember what I told you about the true dragon's vein?" The fatty nodded. The true dragon's vein has an enormous dragon aura. You've felt it before. Even if I can store it in the jade bracelet, the enormous dragon aura won't be able to be concealed and will be easily discovered by others. Your master's formation should be called the spirit locking formation. He gave it to me so that I could imprint it on the jade bracelet to conceal the true dragon's veins, aura. I explained to the fatty. The fatty replied, "Oh." However, he immediately became suspicious and asked again, "Why haven't I felt the enormous dragon aura from before?" Even though I trusted the fatty, I couldn't easily reveal the dark green energy. I smiled and vaguely said, "I'm currently using another method to conceal it, but that method is the same as the formation you made last time. It can only temporarily conceal the true dragon's aura and won't last long. I'll have to use the spirit locking formation to solve the problem." The fatty was magnanimous and didn't suspect anything. He nodded and received the jade bracelet. He smiled and said, "You don't know how to use our Zhan Shi factions formation. Since my master told me to give it to you, he definitely wants me to imprint the formation on the jade bracelet. This is just right. I can also take the opportunity to study the 5 Emperors' money." The fatty's expression became solemn, and he sat cross-legged at the table. He held the jade bracelet in his left hand and the 5 shells in his right hand. He placed both hands on his knees and slowly closed his eyes. I held my breath and waited at the side. I thought that the fatty would do something, but after waiting for half an hour, he still maintained his previous motionless posture. However, his breathing became longer as though he had entered a meditative state. After more than half an hour, a white light suddenly flashed in the fatty's right hand. The 5 shells rose into the air along with the light and slowly flew in front of him, hovering at the same level as his eyes. After the shells stopped, Fatty's left eye slowly opened. The pupil in his eye had already become a vertical line. When his eye opened completely, the vertical pupils separated from the middle, forming an upper and lower pupil. Although this wasn't the first time I had seen such a miraculous scene, I was still astonished. During the trip to the Fire God Temple over a year ago, I had just stepped into the dragon-seeking realm. When I saw the fatty's eyes, I didn't think much of it. However, at this moment, I felt goosebumps all over my body. Even though the Tao of divination didn't differentiate between the realms of a geomaster, this miraculous scene hinted that the fatty's power was advancing towards the glorious consciousness realm. After the discussion, the fatty said that he would report this matter to spiritual Master Guan and see how his master would explain it. After saying that, he hurriedly left. At this time, the sky was already dark. After the fatty left, I prepared to sleep. However, I inadvertently saw the small wooden box from before. Only then did I remember that there was a slip of paper in the box. Just now, our attention was focused on the 5 emperors' coins, and we forgot about the slip of paper. I extended my hand to open the box and took out the slip of paper. When I opened it, I saw 2 rows of tiny words. Zhou, Wu, Zhang, and Wang are all preposterous. Desolate tomb, flesh mound, boundless Tao scriptures. Chapter 245. I held the slip of paper and studied it for a long time. Except for the first 4 words, I couldn't find anything special about it. What was more puzzling was that Nangong had sent me this note, but Immortal Guan wasn't related to me, and we hadn't even talked much. What did he want to do by sending me this note in secret? There were more and more mysteries surrounding me, and I felt a little numb. I folded the note and put it away. No matter what these words were hinting at, what would come would come. I just had to take it one step at a time. In the next few days, Immortal Guan didn't show up again. Every day, I would go with the fatty and Yi Piampian to see the scenery around Mount Huangguan. When I had free time, I didn't cultivate my Taoist qi anymore. Instead, I went to the top of the mountain to sit cross-legged and look up at the sky to perceive the stars. Although picking stars was just a rumor, it was the dream of every feng shui master. I had the talent of 4 meridians that other feng shui masters didn't have, and the Taoist qi in my body was 4 apertures higher than that of ordinary people. My possibility of picking stars was higher than that of others. Unfortunately, a dream was just a dream. Half a month had passed, and I didn't even feel a wisp of the power of the stars, let alone picking stars. I wasn't discouraged at all. I just waited quietly for Yi Piampian's news. Grandpa Li's situation didn't seem to be going well. After half a month, Yi Piampian still hadn't sent me any news. After 1 month, she suddenly came to me and told me that Grandpa Li had returned to the headquarters. We should go there directly. I felt strange and asked her, didn't we agree to meet with Grandpa Li first and then go to the headquarters together? Yi Piampian looked puzzled. I don't know. Grandpa Li contacted me a week ago and told me that he had left Shenangjia. He agreed to meet me on the way, but then he said that he had something to do on the way, and it wasn't convenient for us to go there. He asked us to go back to the headquarters 1 week later. After listening to her, I couldn't help but smile wryly. I had felt that Grandpa Li was avoiding me on purpose, and now I was even more certain. Something to do on the way was just an excuse. He must have changed his mind after hearing that I was with Yi Piampian. He had helped me so much before, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he was my savior. But why was he deliberately avoiding me? I couldn't figure it out, no matter how hard I tried. In the end, I had to give up. I packed my luggage and went down the mountain with Yi Piampian. At first, only Yi Piampian and I were going to leave, but when the fatty heard that Mr. Li had come out of the Fire God Temple, he insisted on going with him. Left with no choice, we had to take him with us and go to see Immortal Guan to say goodbye. When we arrived, enlightened Master Guan personally received us, but when we left, he didn't show his face. He didn't even see the fatty. He only sent a little Taoist boy to bid farewell to us. After leaving Mount Huangguanshan, the fatty was depressed on the way to the capital. It was obvious that he was preoccupied with his father's matter. Yi Piampian was still the same, quiet. As for me, I was thinking about glory of knowledge, so I didn't speak much. We stayed silent the whole way to the capital. After we got off the train in the outskirts of the capital, Mr. Li had arranged for 2 people to meet us at the train station. One of them was my old acquaintance, Yang Shilong, and the other was a middle-aged man about the same age as Yang Shilong. The 2 of them stood there. Yang Shilong was half a step behind the man, and his expression was respectful. It seemed that this man's position was higher than Yang Shilong's. I was a little surprised. Yang Shilong was the vice president, and he seemed to be at the later stage of glory of knowledge. Although the Metaphysics Society was based on seniority, power was the biggest asset. This man's position was higher. Could he be at the heavenly master realm? Although I was thinking about it, I didn't rashly ask him. I just went over to greet him. Although this man looked calm and didn't look easy to get along with, he spoke calmly. He introduced himself as Chao Kuo, but he didn't mention his position in the Metaphysics Society. After leaving the train station, I was still worried about the Liu family. I wanted to go to the headquarters first. However, Yang Shilong and Yi Piampian weren't in a hurry. They took me to have a meal first. Then they got into Yang Shilong's business car and headed to the headquarters. After arriving at the headquarters, Yang Shilong and Chao Kuo quickly left. Yi Piampian arranged for the fatty to rest first. Then she took me to the Metaphysics Society's office. She told me that I needed to register according to the Metaphysics Society's rules. Then I would be tested for the 5 elements. Then I would be given a suitable amount of obsidian stone. I didn't have any objections and obediently followed Yi Piampian's arrangement. After registering, I went back to call the fatty and followed Yi Piampian to the house of Yi Piampian and Mr. Li, where I had stayed the last time. The Liu family had several heavenly masters. If they wanted to kill me and used some sinister methods, it wouldn't be safe for me to stay in the Metaphysics Society's headquarters. That was why Mr. Li arranged for me to stay in his house and personally protect me. On the way, Yi Piampian told me that it was Mr. Li's idea. After knowing this, I felt even more grateful to Mr. Li. At the same time, I was even more puzzled. He had always been nice to me, but he had always avoided me. I couldn't understand his behavior. Chapter 246. After the agreement, the fatty promised me that he would stay here for the next few days and wait for me to break through to glory consciousness realm. He wouldn't go anywhere else. Only then did I relax. For the next 3 days, I stayed in the small courtyard and waited for news. It wasn't until the evening of the 4th day that Yi Piampian finally sent news. She said that the great metaphysical families had arrived at the headquarters and had already discussed how to distribute the blazing stones. It was related to my interests, so I asked Yi Piampian, how much did the headquarters get in the end? The metaphysical aristocratic families didn't snatch too much, right? However, Yi Piampian's expression was a little strange. She shook her head and said, the specific amount is not yet decided. It depends on your performance. I was bewildered as I didn't understand what she meant. Yi Piampian immediately explained, as for the specific distribution method, the metaphysical families debated for several days, but they couldn't come to a conclusion. In the end, President Gu suggested that the 9 families should each send a person who has reached the peak acupoint realm, while the Metaphysical Union would send 3 people. There would be a total of 12 people. They would hold a competition and distribute the obsidian stones according to their ranking. Of course, the participants will receive a 10th of the obsidian they obtain. It took me a while to understand what she meant. I pointed at myself and asked, "You mean I'm one of the 3 candidates for the Metaphysics Society?" Ypiampian nodded. "You have top 4 meridians talent and happen to be at the pressure acupoint perfection realm. Naturally, there will be a spot for you." I knew that it wouldn't be easy to obtain obsidian stones. I had to rely on myself to obtain them. However, this method also had its benefits. The participants could obtain 1/10 of the obsidian stones they obtained. This meant that if I obtained first place, I would definitely obtain a lot of obsidian stones. After asking Ypiampian about the details, I learned that the Metaphysics Union had obtained a total of about 800 pieces of blazing stone, and each piece was exactly one person's share. The Taoist and metaphysical schools had thousands of years of inheritance, so they had a very good understanding of blazing stone. They had long set a standard amount. The so-called one person's share was just enough for a feng shui master to break through to the glorious knowledge realm. The weight was about 5 kilograms. Because of the high density of obsidian, 5 kilograms sounded like a lot, but in reality, it was only the size of a fist. Of course, due to the different talents and physiques of feng shui masters, 1 obsidian stone per person was only the general standard. Generally speaking, 3 obsidian stones were enough for anyone who could sense astral power to break through. According to the agreed method, there would be a total of 12 participants from the 9 great metaphysical families and the 3 from the Metaphysical Association. The top 12 would each receive 10 to 120 obsidian stones. As for the participating feng shui master, he would receive 1 to 12 obsidian stones. It was hard to say if the person in 12th place had enough bright stones, but the person in first place had a total of 12 pieces, so it should be enough. Furthermore, the participants this time are all at the acupuncture point perfection realm. Based on my experience during this period of time, not to mention the acupuncture point perfection realm, I have the confidence to defeat even those at the early and middle stages of the glorious memory realm. Even though the prodigies of the metaphysical families were much stronger than ordinary people, I still had the confidence to obtain first place. After thinking for a while, just as I was about to speak, Ypiampian persuaded me again. When you are at the acupuncture point perfection realm, you have 4 meridians. When you are at the glorious memory realm, there is a high possibility that you will have talents of the 5 elements, so you will need many kinds of obsidian stones. It will be very difficult for the Metaphysical Association to satisfy your needs alone. The quality of the blazing obsidian stone this time is extremely high. If you have the need, you can easily exchange it for other kinds of obsidian stones. Her words made me interested. I had never heard of exchanging obsidian stones before. After asking, I found out that due to the special nature of obsidian stones in the metaphysical world, it was almost equivalent to a hard currency. No matter if it was a metaphysical family or an ordinary high-rank feng shui master, they would always keep a few pieces of obsidian stones on hand if they had the chance. Between these high-rank feng shui masters, there would often be transactions of talismans, magic tools, etc. Normally, these transactions were done through barter. However, the value of the item wasn't constant, so when bartering was impossible, they would use obsidian stones to purchase it. Therefore, obsidian stones had a large amount of circulation in the metaphysical world. Exchanging fire obsidian stones for other types of obsidian stones couldn't be any easier. After understanding, I nodded and said with a smile, "All right, I'll try my best to get a higher ranking so that I won't delay my glory of knowledge." However, Ypiampian shook her head. "You have to get first place. You have 4 meridians. Under the most ideal situation, you can detect 4 types of power of the 5 elements. 3 obsidian stones are needed to ensure that one type of power of the 5 elements breaks through to glory of knowledge. 4 types is exactly 12 pieces. You can't be careless about this. 5 elemental talents were related to one's strength after attaining glory of knowledge. Within the same rank, a feng shui master with 2 types of power of the 5 elements would definitely be stronger than a feng shui master with only 1 type of power of the 5 elements. This was something that everyone in the metaphysical world knew. However, this was the first time I had heard of the theory that 5 elemental talents were related to the acupoints opened by attaching acupoints. After a series of inquiries, I found out that 5 elemental talents were completely determined by the acupoints opened by attaching acupoints. With 1 meridian, only 1 type of elemental talent could be revealed. With 2 meridians and 2 meridians, 2 types could be revealed. Based on this, I had 3 meridians and 5 acupoints, so the best possibility was for me to reveal 4 types of elemental talents. From the looks of it, I really had to do my best to get first place. Of course, I still didn't feel any pressure. At this moment, Yi Pianpian said, "In terms of strength, although the people from the aristocratic families of metaphysics are strong, their talents are far inferior to yours. It's unlikely that they'll be your match in the same realm. However, I have to remind you that this competition concerns the interests of the 9 great metaphysical families. Moreover, it's also a chance for you to display your strength. The people sent by the aristocratic families will most likely have various heavenly master rank artifacts and high-level talismans that can increase their strength by a lot. Under the influence of these external forces, you won't just be competing in terms of strength, but also the foundations of the aristocratic families." A bucket of cold water was poured over my head, causing my heart to instantly sink. Heavenly master rank artifacts were still manageable. A feng shui master who had reached the peak of attaching acupoints might not be able to display much of their strength, but high-level talismans weren't to be trifled with. All of their power was stored within the talisman and could be activated as long as there was Tao Qi. In layman's terms, it was like a hand grenade. It was a one-time use item, as long as the fuse was pulled. A 3-year-old child could use it with the same power as a Special Forces soldier. Scarlet talismans were still manageable, but if purple talismans that could only be made by people in the glorious consciousness realm, or even silver and gold talismans that could only be made by people in the heavenly master realm appeared, then it wouldn't matter how strong I was. I quickly asked Yi Pianpian. This time, I'm representing the Metaphysics Association to participate in the competition. The Metaphysics Association has to do something, right? We can't just tell the horses to run and not eat grass, right? Yi Pianpian nodded. The Metaphysics Association will naturally provide you with something, but you have to be mentally prepared. After all, the Metaphysics Association can't compare to the aristocratic families of metaphysics. It's hard to say how much they can provide you with due to the conflict of interests. I was momentarily speechless. The metaphysical world was originally a place far away from the hustle and bustle of the secular world, but the Metaphysics Association was a bureaucratic organization. From the looks of it, it wasn't any different from the secular world. Perhaps it was because she saw that I was discouraged. Yi Pianpian quickly comforted me. "You don't have to worry too much. The Metaphysics Association won't do anything, but Grandpa Ali definitely won't just watch the fiery obsidian stones fall into the hands of the aristocratic families. I'll tell Grandpa Ali about this later, and he'll definitely talk to President Gu." Yi Pianpian seemed to have confidence in Grandpa Ali, but I didn't have much hope. Grandpa Ali's status was high, but from the fact that he allowed the Metaphysics Association and the aristocratic families to discuss how to distribute the fiery obsidian stones, it was clear that he didn't want to meddle in the affairs of the Metaphysics Association. Furthermore, bureaucracy wasn't something that could be solved by a single person, even if that person was the highest leader. I nodded and smiled wryly. "All right, let's not talk about this for now. When will the competition start? And who will the other aristocratic families send? Have you already confirmed all of these? Ypiampian nodded. The time is set for 3 days from now. As for the people sent by the aristocratic families, there are a few that you're familiar with. Familiar? How could there be people I'm familiar with in the aristocratic families? Without waiting for me to ask, Ypiampian continued. Han Wenan from the Han family of Qinling Mountains, Zhang Kunlun from the Zhang family of Mount Mang, and Lu Xinjiang from the Lu family of the capital will all be participating. Chapter 247. Puzzled, I couldn't help but ask Ypiampian, their talents aren't as good as mine, so why are their cultivation speeds so fast? Hearing my question, Ypiampian was stunned for a moment. Then the corners of her mouth rose slightly. She smiled and said, within the pressure point realm, cultivation speed doesn't have much meaning. It's said that it takes 3 years to search for the dragon and 10 years to seal the acupoint, but metaphysical aristocratic families have their own methods to strengthen their Dao Qi, regardless of talent. As long as they are willing, they can quickly reach pressure point perfection. This isn't rare. On the other hand, you've always been cultivating alone, yet you can maintain this speed. It's really extraordinary. After hearing her words, I became even more puzzled. I hesitated for a moment before asking, then how long did you take to reach pressure point perfection from the dragon Qi baptism? Ypiampian said indifferently, 6 months. My mouth gaped open. It seemed that I had misunderstood her. I had thought that she had taken at least 1 or 2 years to complete the young phoenix gathering from the last one to the current one. I hadn't expected that she had only taken 6 months. This speed really made me blush with shame. Ypiampian seemed to be a little emotional at this moment. She continued, 6 months complete, 3 months glory of knowledge. From then until now, it's been a full 3 years. I'm only at the intermediate stage of glory of knowledge. Within the pressure point realm, cultivation speed doesn't have much meaning. After glory of knowledge, it's different. Other than the obsidian stone, there's almost nothing that can affect cultivation speed. Everything depends on talent. At that time, those metaphysical aristocratic families won't be able to catch up to you. So that's how it is. Looks like I'm ignorant and ill-informed. All along, I've been cultivating alone. Although I can understand the general knowledge of metaphysics from the death scripture, the death scripture has its limitations. It can't be truly all-encompassing. When it came to these common sense things, I was far inferior to Ypiampian and the others. Taking this opportunity, I asked Ypiampian what she meant by 6 months complete, 3 months glory of knowledge. She reached pressure point perfection in 6 months, but why did it take another 3 months to reach glory of knowledge? Ypiampian told me that although one relied on obsidian stone to obtain star power during glory of knowledge, a geomancer had to first comprehend a trace of star power. It was like a talisman. It needed Dao Qi to guide it to activate the power within. Comprehending astral power required a process, and many people could even spend several years in this process. Moreover, not everyone could attain glorious knowledge after obtaining the obsidian stone. As for those who practiced the Tao of divination, once they reached the celestial master realm, they would be completely different from before. Their power would be far beyond that of ordinary people who practiced the mountain arts. Take the Fatty's divination sect's founder, Yuan Tiangang, Li Chunfeng, and the others as examples. Which one of them wasn't an almighty expert? Even without mentioning the heavenly master realm in the future, with Fatty's current Tao of array formations, he was far from having the strength to truss a chicken. Previously, when he faced the few old Taoists from Mount Longhu, who were in the glory of consciousness realm, Fatty's array formation had firmly blocked them outside, and they could not even take a step in. I disdainfully argued with the Fatty for a long time, but he just kept crying. His lazy and scoundrelly character really infuriated me. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the morning of the fourth day, Yi Piampian drove over to pick me up. We went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters together. Originally, this competition was the Metaphysics Society's internal affair. Moreover, it was related to the distribution of the obsidian stones. Everything was strictly confidential. However, the fatty dragged me and Yi Piampian to watch the competition. Eventually, Yi Piampian couldn't change his mind and agreed to bring him along. As the vice president of the Metaphysics Society and backed by Grandpa, Yi Piampian's position in the Metaphysics Society wasn't ordinary. Bringing someone to watch the competition wasn't a big deal. Then, the three of us got in the car and went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters. When we arrived, I quickly saw the other two participants of the Metaphysics Society besides me. One of them looked unfamiliar. He wasn't young, was tall and thin, and had a sickly face. Yi Piampian introduced him as Li Enqing. The other young man was called Zhou Yu. He looked familiar. I tried to recall and remembered that I had met him at the Young Phoenix gathering. He was a member of the Shandong branch. He had woken up a moment before Zhang Wenfei. His innate talent was the same as Zhang Wenfei's. He had 8 apertures in 1 meridian. When I saw him, I couldn't help but think of Zhang Wenfei. If nothing had happened to him, he would have reached the peak of the acupoint ceiling realm. Perhaps his name would have been on the Metaphysics Society's list of participants. It was a pity that the heavens were jealous of such a talented person. This time, Lu Xinjiang would also be participating. Although he had lost an arm, it didn't affect his cultivation much. In a short year, he had reached the peak of the acupoint ceiling realm. Good people don't live long, while scourges live for 1,000 years. This sentence was the most suitable to describe Zhang Wenfei and Lu Xinjiang. At that moment, I suddenly thought of a problem. Would I meet Lu Xinjiang again in the competition? Lu Xinjiang had 3 meridians and was the direct descendant of the Lu family. He definitely wasn't weak. It was possible that he would go far in the competition. If I wanted to get first place, the probability of me meeting him was high. During the previous Young Phoenix gathering, Lu Xinjiang had provoked me many times. I was apprehensive of the Lu family's power. Even if it was a life and death battle, I didn't dare to be ruthless. It wasn't until the last Young Phoenix gathering that I used my dragon-seeking realm to deal with his acupoint ceiling realm that I used all my power to break his arm. Up until now, I was filled with regret. There were many times when I thought back. If I had killed him, would the Lu family only target me, and wouldn't my parents be implicated? Hypothetically speaking, there would never be an answer. Thinking too much about it was pointless. However, the situation this time was different from the last time. I was a lonely person without a father or mother. I had a rotten life that even the heavens and earth couldn't spare. I no longer had any apprehensions. If I really met Lu Xinjiang, I would definitely use my full strength. However, the chance of killing him wasn't high. Back in Meizhou, Zhang Canwen and I worked together, but we couldn't do anything to Lu Qingping's life-saving artifact. As the direct descendant of the Lu family, it was impossible for Lu Xinjiang to not have any life-saving methods in this competition. Thinking about that, I coldly smiled. So, what if he had a life-saving method? No matter how strong it was still an external power. It could only be used when his life was in danger. If I didn't kill him, I wouldn't activate his life-saving method. I would only cripple his cultivation and turn him into a cripple. He would have a taste of what I felt like back then. Chapter 248. As I thought about it, I didn't show it on my face. After I talked to Li Enqing and Zhou Yu, I pulled Yi Piampian to the side and asked her, It's impossible that the Metaphysics Association doesn't know about the grudge between me and the Lu family. Lu Xinjiang and I will be participating in this competition. Isn't the Metaphysics Association worried that something might happen? Yi Piampian shook her head. Of course, the Metaphysics Association is worried. But when we decided to let you participate in the competition, we had a discussion. Everyone felt that you and Lu Xinjiang are on par. It might be easy to determine the winner, but a life and death battle would be difficult. That's why we arranged for you to participate in the competition. I was stunned by her answer, but I understood after thinking about it. I knew that I was stronger in terms of absolute power, and Lu Xinjiang was stronger in terms of external power. It would be difficult to fight to the death. The people from the Metaphysics Association were much stronger than me, so it wasn't strange for them to see that. However, they probably didn't know that not only was my 4 meridians more talented than Lu Xinjiang, but I also had 4 extra apertures of Dao Qi, and the true dragon vein that could recover Dao Qi at any time. Most importantly, ever since Zhenren Guan had sealed the jade bracelet with the spirit locking formation, I had absorbed all of the dark green power into my body. The dark green power didn't have much effect on Chun Yangting's Heaven's Lightning, but that didn't mean that it wasn't powerful. In fact, the reason why I was able to defeat Han Wen'en and Lu Xinjiang during the Young Phoenix Gathering was because of the weak dark green power in my body. Now, all of the dark green power in the black bead had been absorbed by me into the 10 apertures of the Heaven's Meridian. In terms of quantity, it was almost the same as the Dao Qi. Back then, a faint trace of dark green energy had been mixed into the Taoist Qi, and it had been able to exert such great power. This time, what kind of power would the dark green energy that had completely filled the 10 apertures of the heavenly meridian be able to exert? Even I didn't know. This was the reason why I had the confidence to cripple Lu Xinjiang. Even if Lu Xinjiang had external help, as long as his power didn't exceed the Celestial Master Realm, I was confident that I could deal with him. So, after hearing Yi Piampian's answer, I was actually quite happy. If the people from the Metaphysics Association thought this way, then the people from the Lu family would also think the same way. They wouldn't put up much of a defense. If I really crippled Lu Xinjiang, who knew how wonderful their expressions would be, after thinking for a while, I asked Yi Piampian if, and I'm just saying if I kill Lu Xinjiang or severely injure him, the Lu family definitely won't let this go. What will the Metaphysics Society's attitude be? At this moment, Yi Piampian suddenly raised the corner of her mouth. She stared at me with interest for a while before saying, "I knew you would ask this. I can't be sure about the attitude of the Metaphysics Association. They will definitely protect you, but it's hard to say how much they will protect you if no one stands up for you. However, there is one person whose attitude I am very clear about." I didn't quite understand what she meant and asked curiously, "Who?" Yi Piampian raised her head slightly, her usual proud expression instantly appearing on her face. "Grandpa Li, yesterday he told me that if you didn't look for me today, it would be fine. However, if you came to ask me this question, I have to answer you with one sentence. Life and death in the arena depends on one's own ability. You don't have to worry about anything else. He will be there." I was stunned at first, but then I felt ecstatic. Grandpa Li's words obviously meant that I didn't need to worry about anything. Even if I killed Lu Xinjiang, he would still be able to stop the people from the Lu family. Originally, I was alone. Now that I had Grandpa Li's guarantee, I grinned and didn't have any worries in my heart. I thought that this was the biggest surprise of the day, but unexpectedly, after Yi Piampian finished talking, she took out a small mahogany box and handed it to me. "I told you the other day that the support of the Metaphysics Association wouldn't be that great. After that, I went to find Grandpa Lee and wanted him to supervise President Gu. However, Grandpa Lee didn't do that. He just asked me to bring this wooden box to you, saying that you can use it in the competition. After saying that, Yi Pianpian seemed to be in a good mood. She wore a faint smile and joked with me, which was rare. I'm a little jealous of you now. Grandpa Lee doesn't treat me as well as he does you. I couldn't stop smiling. Grandpa Lee was at the Heavenly Master Realm, so the things he gave me wouldn't be any worse than those from the metaphysics families. During the competition, I was only worried that the people from the metaphysics families would use external objects. Now that I had an external object to rely on, the last trace of worry in my heart disappeared. I couldn't wait to open the wooden box to see what was inside, but Yi Pianpian stopped me. There are too many people here. It won't be too late to look at it when I find a place with fewer people. I nodded and didn't insist. Besides me, Yi Pianpian, and the other two contestants, there were also a few directors and vice presidents of the Metaphysics Association. They were all at the glorious knowledge realm. The item in the wooden box had a very strong fluctuation of Tao energy. I could faintly feel it through the wooden box. If I took it out, it would be hard to avoid being noticed by others. After explaining everything, Yi Pianpian stood up and left. Chapter 249. Silver Talismans. Talismans were divided according to power. There were a total of 5 colors from strongest to weakest: gold, silver, purple, red, and yellow. Normal feng shui talismans. And those below the Glory of Knowledge Realm were all yellow talismans. At the Glory of Knowledge Realm, one could make powerful red talismans. As for the strongest gold and silver talismans, that was the monopoly of Sky Masters. Purple talismans were a different type of talisman. Although they were of a higher rank than red talismans, their power was hard to say. This was because these purple talismans were sets of talismans and not made up of individual talismans. Some purple talismans were made up of yellow, red, silver, and even gold talismans. Their power was even stronger than gold talismans. However, these kinds of talisman sets were very rare. Most of them were passed down in places like Dragon Tiger Mountain. In reality, these kinds of talismans were rarely seen. The Death Scripture had many ways to make purple talismans. Back then, when I moved Chief Lu's grave, I made a small deception talisman. It was one of the purple deception talismans. As for the extremely powerful silver talismans and golden talismans, although they could only be made by the Celestial Master Realm, there was a huge difference between them. Normally, after reaching the Celestial Master Realm, most people could make silver talismans, but not golden talismans. Only those who had a deep understanding of the Tao of talismans and had a cultivation base that reached a higher realm among the Celestial Masters would have a chance of successfully making golden talismans. Their power was extremely terrifying, but they were extremely rare. Even the Metaphysics Society in Dragon Tiger Mountain might not have a few gold talismans, let alone the feng shui families. It was almost impossible for it to appear in our pressure point completion realm battles. It was impossible even for the obsidian stone, because the value of gold talismans was far higher than obsidian stone. In other words, in this competition, the highest that could appear was a silver talisman. An elder, Li, had given me 2 silver talismans in one go. I was almost certain that no one in this competition would be my match. Sitting on the toilet bowl, my heart was filled with excitement. After a while, I finally calmed down. I carefully held the silver talismans in the wooden box and closed my eyes. I carefully used my Tao Qi to sense the Tao intent contained in the silver talismans. Although the silver talismans were strong, I had to at least understand their use before using them. After comprehending for a while, I quickly sensed an extremely sharp aura from the first talisman. There was no doubt that this was an offensive talisman of the metal attribute. There was an extremely powerful, offensive Taoist technique sealed inside. Just by comprehending it with my Taoist chi, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was obvious how powerful it was. As for the second silver talisman, there was no need to comprehend it. There was a line of words clearly written on it, Thunder City General Marshal Ma Talisman. It was a Celestial Master Sex 36 Heavenly General Talisman. Its function was similar to the Mao Mountain Sex Mao Mountain Talisman. However, the Mao Mountain Sex Mao Mountain Talisman was very random. Even a superior Mao Mountain Talisman might not be able to invite a truly powerful heavenly god or heavenly general. The 36 Heavenly General Talisman was much more precise. The one in front of them was the talisman used to invite Marshal Ma. Marshal Ma was the Lord Ma that the people often spoke of. There was a common saying, "Don't you know that the Lord Ma has 3 eyes?" This was referring to one of the 36 heavenly generals of Thunderclap City, Marshal Ma. According to the legends, Lord Ma was one of the 28 constellations in the sky, the Sun Horse of Star. However, in the Taoist memorial tablets, Lord Ma's official name was Spirit Official Marshal Ma, also known as the Three-Eyed Spirit. The 36 heavenly generals of Thunderclap City were divine generals with peerless heavenly power. It wasn't hard to imagine the power of summoning them. The value of this talisman was even higher than the metal attribute talisman, with an extremely strong attack power. I was very satisfied with these 2 silver talismans. The only thing I was puzzled about was why Mr. Li, the patriarch of the Metaphysics Society, had a talisman from Mount Longhu. It was really strange. However, I guessed that Mr. Li had exchanged them with someone from Mount Longhu. I didn't think too much about it. After putting the 2 silver talismans away, I left the bathroom and returned to the room I had stayed in. When I returned, an unfamiliar member of the Metaphysics Society was waiting for me. When he saw me, he hurried to tell me that the competition was about to begin. He asked me to hurry. Li Finching, Zhou Yu, and I followed the member to the hall where the Young Phoenix gathering had been held. When we arrived, the other members of the metaphysical families had already gathered in the hall. The participants were standing by the platform, and the seats below were filled with people from the Metaphysics Society and other families. I saw Lu Jinyang standing by the platform. He seemed to be staring at the door. When I noticed him, he also stared at me. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. However, this time, he was much calmer than before. He didn't take the initiative to talk to me. Instead, he wore a cold smile on his face. His left hand, which was missing his forearm, scratched his neck. It was obvious that he was provoking me. I just smiled at him and didn't reply. Instead, I turned around and looked at the seats below. As soon as I turned around, my eyes shrank. Lu Jinyang called third grandpa Lu Xening. He was sitting in the first row with Yang Shilong and the others. Lu Xening, who was in the Sky Master realm, was also there. His expression was much calmer than Lu Jinyang's. When I looked at him, he only glanced at me before looking away. It was obvious that he didn't care about me. I also quickly looked away. I clenched and relaxed my fists. After a few times, I finally relaxed. Lu Jinyang was hateful, but Lu Xening was even more hateful. He was the one who killed my parents. My hatred for him wasn't any less than Lu Jinyang's. However, I had no choice but to hide my hatred. He was a Sky Master. I had a good chance to take revenge on Lu Jinyang during the competition. However, against a Sky Master like Lu Xening, I didn't know when I would get the chance to take revenge. I might not even be able to do it in my entire life. Thinking about that, the excitement I had when I saw the 2 silver talismans disappeared, I clenched my teeth and urged myself, I must quickly study Yao and reach Sky Master as soon as possible. Every day I thought about the Liu family's vengeance was another day of torment in my heart. After a long time, I finally calmed down. I didn't look at Liu's Xening anymore and threw him to the back of my mind. At that moment, on the platform, President Gu personally drew lots for the 12 participants. Then he announced the results. The 9 aristocratic families of the Metaphysics Society were Qinling Han family, Mount Mangzhong family, Beijing Lu family, Chengdu Yang family, Lu Lianglai family, Jinling Su family, Kaifeng Bao family, Xiangyang Lu family, and Huizhou Chen family. These aristocratic families were either located in famous historical cities or Taoist holy lands. However, from the names of these families, it was obvious that none of them were easy to get along with. I didn't care about how the other people were grouped. I only remembered that I was grouped with Huizhou Chen family's Chen Yadong. Huizhou was an ancient name that was no longer used. Its main jurisdiction included the present-day Huangshan City, Xian City's Jishi County, Jiangxi County's Wuyuan County, and other places. It could also be considered a famous historical city. However, more importantly, there was Mount Qiyun. In ancient times, it was called White Mountain or Cloud Mountain. It was a famous place of the Chuanjin sect and was one of the 4 famous mountains of Taoism. Since the Chun family was a famous family, it was normal to have a family like the Chun family, although Huizhou was famous, and Mount Qiyun was even more famous compared to the other aristocratic families. Chun Yadong was the weakest. My luck wasn't bad. After the lots were drawn, no one had any objections, and soon the competition officially began in accordance with the order. Coincidentally, Chun Yadong and I were assigned to the first match. Under the gazes of the crowd, we walked to the platform and began the first match of the competition. Although Chun Yadong's power was the weakest, even a lion would use its full strength to capture a rabbit. I didn't dare to be negligent, and steadily took out my heavenly fan and Inyang Yama Luo brush. While I prepared my defense, I tried to lure the yin and yang fishes to attack. Chun Yadong was also testing the waters at the start. He only used his magic tool to fight against me. However, even if I didn't use the dark green power, my Tao energy was still more than half of an ordinary person's. Soon, Chun Yadong showed signs of defeat. Without any other choice, he took out a red talisman. After receiving the Tao energy, he took advantage of the gap between the magic tool's attacks and threw it at me. This talisman was completely different from the one that the Metaphysics Association had given me. It was a true attack talisman. The Tao energy condensed in midair and formed an enormous flame. It carried boundless heat as it charged towards me. In reality, the merit supervisor on duty had 2 roles. The first was to serve as an errand boy for the mighty figures of the heavenly master realm to make talismans for the heavens to hear. Secondly, when he was summoned in a battle at the Glory of Consciousness realm, he would act as a meat shield. He would stand there, not speaking or moving, only taking hits without attacking. He would absorb the opponent's firepower until his spiritual body was scattered, and then he would return. Naturally, the one I summoned didn't show any abnormalities. It just stood there obediently, allowing the ball of fire to descend upon its body. After being roasted, the ball of fire and the merit officer on duty disappeared at the same time. The 2 scarlet talismans canceled out their effects. After that, Chun Yadong was also very straightforward. He knew that he wasn't my opponent in terms of strength and external items, so he directly admitted defeat and left the stage. I won the first round easily. After President Gu personally went on stage to announce the results, I went to rest. Afterwards, the other 8 great metaphysical families, as well as the Metaphysics Association's Li Yinqing and Zhou Yu took turns to fight. Besides Li Yinqing and Zhou Yu's 2 battles that were a little anxious, the other 3 battles all ended cleanly. After the first round, there weren't any dark horses. On the side of the metaphysical families, the victors were Han Wennan, Lu Xinyang, Zhang Kunlun, and Su Kuan from the Su family of Jinling, whom I hadn't seen at the Young Phoenix gathering. On the side of the Metaphysics Association, Li Yinqing and I won. Zhou Yu, who had the same talent as Zhang Wenfei, was unlucky and met Lu Xinyang. Lu Xinyang was much calmer than before. He knew to hide his strength during the battle, so he didn't use much of his Dao Qi. He only used scarlet talismans one after another. Zhou Yu, who only had the 2 merit calling talismans given by the Metaphysics Association, was powerless to resist and was forcefully thrown off the platform. It was already noon. After everyone had rested, Yi Piampian drove me and the fatty back to the small courtyard. In the afternoon, the ranking of the 6 people who were defeated would be decided. It had nothing to do with me, so there was no need to waste time there. The night passed uneventfully. On the morning of the second day, I rushed to the Metaphysics Association. The rankings of the 6 people who were defeated yesterday had already been decided. I glanced at the rankings and didn't care about the others. I only noticed that Zhou Yu from the Metaphysics Association was ranked last. In terms of strength, Zhou Yu was carefully selected by the Metaphysics Association. His strength wasn't any weaker than the others. It was a pity that the Metaphysics Association only gave him 2 scarlet talismans, and he also met Lu Xinyang yesterday. Even though the current Lu Xinyang's way of doing things had become much steadier, his ruthless nature hadn't changed in the slightest. In the battle yesterday morning, he'd successively used numerous scarlet talismans to force Zhou Yu off the arena, and at the same time, he'd heavily injured Zhou Yu. This had caused Zhou Yu to suffer a crushing defeat in the afternoon battle. Everyone from the Metaphysics Association had ugly expressions on their faces. Yang Shilong purposely came to look for me, and Li Yinqing. He said that Zhou Yu had failed to live up to his expectations, and that the Metaphysics Association's hopes for the Blazing Stones were now on me and Li Yinqing. He wanted us to do our best and not be careless. His words made me pout. Zhou Yu had an 8 meridian talent. In terms of strength, even though he wasn't as strong as Lu Xinyang, he wasn't much weaker than the others. He shouldn't have lost so badly. It was a pity that the Metaphysics Association only gave him 2 merit talismans. It was fine if he couldn't stop Lu Xinyang, but he couldn't even protect himself in the end. Yang Shilong's failure to live up to expectations was unfair. Of course, I only cursed in my heart and didn't communicate with Yang Shilong at all. In this competition, the Metaphysics Association and I were just using each other. I was only interested in the first place, the 12 blazing stones. I wasn't the least bit interested in the Metaphysics Association's glory. After Yang Shilong finished his long-winded speech, he took out 2 more scarlet talismans and passed them to me and Li Yinqing, respectively. Yesterday's battle was very intense. The Metaphysics Association underestimated the difficulty of the competition, so the talismans they gave you were a little shabby. These 2 talismans were made by me, and I'm giving them to the 2 of you privately. I hope that you can use them today. I lowered my head to sense. The grade of the scarlet talisman that was made by the glorious consciousness realm wasn't high. I could easily sense the type of talisman. The 2 scarlet talismans were earth-terminating talismans. It was one of the strongest defensive talismans among the scarlet talismans. Depending on the abilities of the person who made the talisman, it could summon 3 to 9 rays of earth-terminating qi to protect the body. This surprised me, and my opinion of Yang Shilong changed a lot. Even though the Metaphysics Association had given me 3 scarlet talismans, their total value couldn't be compared to the Earth-terminating talisman. Moreover, even though the scarlet talisman wasn't much, in actual fact, the materials needed to make the scarlet talisman were astronomical. The Earth-terminating talisman was a powerful talisman that could only be made in the later stages of the glorious consciousness realm. So its value wasn't low. Yang Shilong actually took out 2 of them under his own name. Chapter 251. Before I could figure it out, Han Wenren, who was standing to the side, suddenly said, "I also have a few silver talismans here. If Brother Zhou needs them, you don't have to borrow them and just take them." Before I could recover from my shock, Han Wenren dropped another bomb. He didn't lend them to me, but gave them to me. Could it be that the Death Scripture's records were wrong? Were silver talismans, that worthless now? Zhang Kunlun, who had been smiling, smiled even more. He looked at Han Wenren and said meaningfully, "The Han family lives in the bitter cold of the Qinling Mountains. I'm afraid they don't have many silver talismans. Brother Han is really generous." Han Wenren still had that honest and slow look, but he quickly replied, "The Qinling Mountains are remote and cold. It's indeed not as comfortable as your MT Mang, but my Han family has been around for 1,000 years. As long as Brother Zhou asks, not to mention silver talismans, my Han family can even take out gold talismans." The more they spoke, the more excessive they became. It was silver talismans just now, but now they even took out gold talismans. I reckoned that even a heavenly teacher wouldn't be able to take out gold talismans. Yet these 2 spoke so calmly. The shock on my face didn't disappear, but I slowly understood. The reason why these 2 were presenting their treasures in front of me wasn't because they had too many talismans to use, but because they wanted to rope me in. To be more accurate, it was the Han and Zhang families behind them that wanted to rope me in. After the Young Phoenix gathering ended, and I revealed my apex 4 meridians, Han Wenren came to find me. The other metaphysical families also sent people to contact me. However, I had just revealed my apex, so the metaphysical families didn't have high expectations for me. When they contacted me, they only asked about my intentions. The biggest promise they made was to tell me that they would provide for all my cultivation needs in the future. It was different this time. Zhang Kunlun and Han Wenren immediately gave out silver talismans. Of course, silver talismans were just an excuse to hint to me that as long as I joined their families, I could ask for any conditions I wanted. After understanding this, I hastily pulled back the 2 of them who were about to start fighting. I smiled wryly and said, "Silver and gold talismans are too precious. Moreover, they probably won't be used in this competition. I appreciate your good intentions, but in the future, if I need them, I'll definitely find you to borrow talismans." Since they spoke in a vague manner, I naturally didn't leave any traces behind in my reply. I only said that I would be in the future, and didn't give them a specific answer. I did my best not to offend anyone. Han Wenren and Zhang Kunlun looked at me in unison. Then they naturally pushed this matter to the side and changed the topic to Lu Xinjiang. Since the Han and Zhang families had the intention to rope me in, it was impossible that they didn't know about the grudge between me and the Lu family. The 2 of them seemed to be chatting, but in actual fact, they were intentionally revealing Lu Xinjiang's background to me. Although they had purposely sold this favor to me, a favor was still a favor. I was still very grateful. At that moment, the people from the metaphysical aristocratic family and the Metaphysical Association had arrived at the venue. The drawing of lots was about to begin. We didn't say anything else and returned to our seats. I didn't know if it was the will of the heavens, but the results of the drawing of lots were quickly announced. The one I met was coincidentally Lu Xingyang. In the other two groups, Han Wen'en met Su Kuan from the Su family of Jinling. In the last group, Li Enqing met Zhang Kunlun. In the first round, there might have been strong and weak confrontations, but in the second round, everyone's strength was rather outstanding. Every group was a battle between the strong. It was different from the day before. The first group today was Han Wen'en and Su Kuan, while the second group was Li Enqing and Zhang Kunlun. Lu Xingyang and I, on the other hand, were in the last group. After the drawing of lots, Han Wen'en and Su Kuan stayed on the platform to fight, while I returned to the seats below. I randomly picked a seat and sat down, quietly watching the fight. In the recent period of time, I have experienced many battles, but it is strange that there are almost no people of the same realm fighting me. Instead, they are all in the glory of knowledge realm. Although a strong opponent was good for me to sharpen myself, it also caused me to be unable to understand the strength of an opponent in the same realm. Just like when Zhang Kunlun told me that Lu Xingyang could use the astral steps, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have known that the pressure point realm could borrow the power of the obsidian stones to use the astral steps. If Lu Xingyang suddenly used it during the battle, I would be shocked and might have been defeated by him. In a battle, strength was important, but the preparation work of knowing oneself and one's enemy was equally important. So, being in the last group today was a good thing. I could seriously observe Han Wen'en and Zhang Kunlun's strength. When we were chatting just now, the two of them kept praising Lu Xingyang's growth in the past year, but didn't mention me at all. However, I understood that the families behind the two of them could be said to be the oldest and most profound family in the metaphysics world. In the past year, if they said that their improvement was less than Lu Xingyang's, I wouldn't believe it. It was just like what Han Wen'en had said when he tried to rope me in after the Young Phoenix gathering. The road of cultivation didn't only look at talent and hard work. Similarly, they didn't react to Li Enqing, who had summoned them. Although the talisman could summon the heavenly official, it was only a Dharmakaya. It didn't have any intelligence. It was rumored that only the golden talisman could summon the heavenly official's true body. As for Li Enqing, after summoning the Dharmakayas of the two merit officials on duty, he suddenly took out a scarlet talisman paper and a huge weasel hair brush. He held the talisman paper in one hand and the weasel hair brush in the other. He actually started writing on the spot. From the looks of it, he was actually making a talisman. Although the speed of the white flame was slow, it was already approaching his body. Even his clothes were starting to turn black from the heat. However, after Li Enqing leisurely wrote a few strokes, he suddenly reached out and threw the scarlet talisman paper onto the white flame. He shouted loudly, "Where are the merit officials on duty? Quickly report this to the heavens." As he spoke, the two merit officials on duty, who had been standing motionless to the side, suddenly moved. Their four hands reached out and directly hugged the scarlet talisman paper. At this moment, the talisman paper just happened to wrap around the white flame. After the merit officials on duty hugged it, the scarlet talisman paper actually didn't ignite. Instead, the white flame disappeared into the talisman paper and disappeared from the arena along with the merit officials on duty. Chapter 253. As I widened my eyes, many of the spectators stood up abruptly and stared at Li Enqing with shock written all over their faces. The entire venue was quiet for a few seconds, and then there was a commotion. Everyone's faces were filled with bewilderment after the shock, and they kept discussing with the people around them. Talismans were one of the most common methods in the metaphysics world. This was the headquarters of the Metaphysics Society, and even the weakest among the spectators was a member of the Metaphysics Society. They were all at least in the glory of knowledge realm, and all of them were people who had studied talismans for many years. However, after discussing for so long, the confusion on their faces didn't lessen, but instead increased. Their gazes towards Li Yanqing were filled with respect. Li Yanqing's face was already sallow and sickly. Now his hair was curled and his clothes were burnt black. He looked even more miserable, but after this battle, no one would dare to look down on him anymore. The discussions below the stage finally quieted down. Zhang Kunlun recovered his usual smile, but no matter how you looked at it, it was a little awkward. Since the outcome of the battle hadn't been decided yet, they naturally had to continue fighting. I thought that Zhang Kunlun would finally take this fight seriously and use his true strength to fight Li Yanqing. However, I didn't expect that this guy would casually take out a silver talisman from his body. He wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He just looked at Li Yanqing with a smile as he fiddled with the silver talisman. It was obvious that he wanted Li Yanqing to back off. Li Yanqing's face was a little green. His way of dealing with the previous silver talisman was indeed shocking, even inconceivable. But this time, he couldn't do it again. At the very least, he only had 2 merit summoning talismans in his hands, and they would be gone after he used them. Facing Zhang Kunlun's second silver talisman, he was completely helpless. Even the spectators couldn't help but sigh, feeling pity for Li Yanqing. In the end, Li Yanqing didn't persist. He cupped his hands towards Zhang Kunlun, admitted defeat, and left the stage. The outcome of the match had been decided, but everyone's attention was focused on the loser, Li Yanqing. No one paid any attention to the victorious Zhang Kunlun. Zhang Kunlun did not care. After putting away the silver talisman in his hand, he leisurely walked down the arena. He was still smiling, and even the slight awkwardness on his face had disappeared. He sat in the seats below the arena, closed his eyes slightly, and closed them to rest. On Li Yanqing's side, after he left the stage, Yang Shilong and the others from the Metaphysics Society went up to him and asked him questions. Although I couldn't hear what they were saying, I didn't need to think to know that they were asking what had happened. How did he use 2 normal red talismans to block a silver talisman? I was also curious. Seeing that Yi Piampian was also there, I quietly went over. After I went over, Yang Shilong and the others seemed to have gotten the answer from Li Yanqing. They all looked pensive and returned to their seats. I wasn't familiar with the others, so I pulled Yi Piampian and whispered to her, "What did Li Yanqing say? What was the talisman he just wrote? How could it be so powerful?" Yi Piampian wore a strange face. The talisman Li Yanqing just wrote was a rain talisman. Her answer was beyond my expectation. It was a rain talisman. This kind of talisman was the lowest grade of Taoist talismans. According to feng shui masters, it was a feng shui talisman. Ordinary feng shui masters who hadn't reached the Earth Master realm could use it. Nowadays, it was rarely used, but in ancient times, it was one of the most commonly used talismans. Usually during a drought, people would find a feng shui master or a Taoist priest to set up a sacrificial altar. After performing a ritual, they would draw a rain talisman and burn it, hoping that it would reach the heavens. As for whether it could reach the heavens or not, the person who performed the ritual wasn't sure. Li Yanqing had used an ordinary talisman to block the silver talisman. How was that possible? Looking at my incredulous face, Yi Piampian didn't wait for me to ask and explained. Although the rain talisman's grade isn't high, it's a rare symbol that has the power to reach the heavens. Even if an ordinary feng shui master finishes his ritual and burns it, there's still a chance that it can reach the heavenly court. Li Yanqing's acupoint ceiling has reached the consummate realm, and he's also comprehended the power of the stars. The effect of his talisman is naturally stronger. Moreover, he used a scarlet talisman paper and a weasel hair brush. He even used 2 merit calling talismans to summon the merit officer Dharmakayas on duty. With all these support, it's normal for the merit officer on duty to receive the report. Li Enqing chose the perfect time. When the merit officer on duty received the report, it happened to envelop the power of the silver talisman. Although the merit officer on duty is only a Dharmakaya and doesn't have enough Taoist energy after receiving the report, he can directly go to the heavenly court. No matter how strong the power of the silver talisman is, it can affect this rule. Thus, it wasn't Li Enqing's talisman that blocked the power of the silver talisman. Instead, the power of the silver talisman was directly taken away by the merit officers on duty. Yi Pianpian's explanation was very thorough, and I could understand her reasoning after thinking about it for a while. However, I still found it hard to believe. The rain talisman, the memorial to the heavenly court, and the merit officer on duty going straight to the heavenly court after receiving the memorial. It was too unbelievable. After hesitating for a while, I couldn't help but ask Yi Pianpian, although we're cultivators, are the heavenly court and the heavenly court true or false? I was just asking casually, but Yi Pianpian's expression became solemn. She said to me seriously, "Of course it's true. If it's false, how could the merit officer's Dharmakaya be summoned? Where did the power of the rain talisman and the rain talisman go? We're all cultivators, and our highest goal is to raise our yang spirit and become an immortal. If it's false, won't our goal of cultivation be meaningless?" I was stunned by her hurried words, but I quickly understood. This matter was related to the foundation of cultivation. If I didn't think it through, I might have an inner demon when I advanced in the future, which would affect my Tao foundation. Yi Pianpian had seen through this problem, which was why she spoke so fiercely. After thinking it through, I became alert and hurriedly threw my previous thoughts to the back of my mind. I sincerely thanked Yi Pianpian. Yi Pianpian heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that I had noticed this problem. She returned the topic to Li Enqing and said, although all cultivators dabble in the Tao of talismans, in terms of usage, there is no Taoist talisman faction in the world. I nodded. That's for sure. Ever since Celestial Master Zhang and Lord Daoist Three Reeds left their orthodoxies, Mount Longhu and Mount Maoshan have been obsessed with the Tao of talismans for 2,000 years. Naturally, they're much stronger than the other factions, whether it's the power or usage of talismans. However, our Metaphysics Association has Li Enqing. Not to mention the power of talismans, his usage is not inferior to that of Mount Longhu. After the previous incident, Yi Pianpian and I had a deep prejudice against Mount Longhu. Now that I mentioned it, I subconsciously mocked Mount Longhu. However, Yi Pianpian's face was still very serious. She turned to look at me and said with a frown, "It's not inferior, but it's much more exquisite than Mount Longhu. The Tao of talismans in the world is unique to Mount Longhu. Why did our Metaphysics Association suddenly have Li Enqing?" The hidden meaning in Yi Pianpian's words startled me. I couldn't help but ask, "You suspect Li Enqing?" Yi Pianpian nodded straightforwardly. Although the rain-praying talisman is a feng shui talisman, since ancient times, feng shui masters have never used it as much as Taoist priests. Moreover, this method of using talismans is too magical. I can believe that it's the inheritance of some family that uses talismans, but I can't believe that Li Enqing came up with this method by himself. I still found it unbelievable. According to Yi Pianpian, Li Enqing was most likely a member of Mount Longhu. But why would Mount Longhu send such a person to the Metaphysics Association? Was it because of the conflict between us and Mount Longhu? Yi Pianpian's identity made them think that the Metaphysics Association wanted to do something to them. So they sent Li Yinqing to be a spy? Now that I thought about it, it did seem possible. However, I still felt that it was ridiculous. In terms of power and foundation, Mount Longhu wasn't weaker than the Metaphysics Association. Moreover, with its rallying power in Taoism, if the Metaphysics Association really had a conflict with Mount Longhu, all the Taoist sects in the world would join Mount Longhu to besiege the Metaphysics Association. At that time, the Metaphysics Association wouldn't have any chance of winning, with such a great disparity in power. Even if Mount Longhu was suspicious, they could have just gone to their sect to question them. Why would they send a spy? However, Yi Pianpian wasn't stupid. If I could think of it, she could probably think of it as well. So, why would she question me? Before I could figure out the reason, President Gu had returned to the platform and announced the start of the third match. I had to stop my doubts. I pointed at the platform and smiled at Yi Pianpian. Go and investigate. If you need any help, just come to me. I'm going up now. Yi Pianpian nodded. Her frown deepened. After a moment of silence, she said to me, "Then take care." I grinned at her and didn't say anything else. I walked up to the platform. Yi Pianpian had a cold temperament. There were some things she couldn't say, but I could feel the worry in her heart. In yesterday's competition, the talismans that appeared in everyone's hands were only scarlet talismans. However, today, silver talismans had appeared. Zhang Kunlun had silver talismans, so naturally, Lu Xingyang also had silver talismans. Moreover, with the Lu family's current popularity, Lu Xingyang's silver talismans would not be less than Zhang Kunlun's. Although I also had 2 silver talismans that Yi Pianpian had given me, I obviously didn't have more than Lu Xingyang's group. Yi Pianpian's worry was probably because of this. I felt much more reassured than Yi Pianpian. The fact that grandfather Li had given me a silver talisman wasn't something that others would think of. Secondly, the power of the 2 silver talismans that grandfather Li had given me was extraordinary. At the very least, they were much stronger than the one that Zhang Kunlun had just used. Even if Lu Xingyang had more silver talismans, they might not be as powerful as mine. Apart from that, the most important thing was that the silver talismans contained the power of the Heavenly Master. Although it didn't consume a lot of Tao energy to activate the silver talismans, it was still a lot. In a match, using 2 or 3 silver talismans was already the limit. No matter how many silver talismans Lu Xingyang had, what was the point if he couldn't use them? Chapter 254. Following President Gu's order, the third match officially began. I stared at Lu Xingyang and didn't make the first move. I just kept my guard up. Lu Xingyang didn't seem to be in a hurry. He stood there leisurely and said to me, "You really surprise me again and again. You know that you might meet me in this match, but you still dared to come up. Your courage is commendable." The corner of my mouth twitched. Lu Xingyang was indeed calm, but his bad habit of not recognizing himself or his opponent hadn't changed. He always felt good about himself. Of course, according to the information provided by Han Wenan and Zhang Kunlun, the current Lu Xingyang had more reason to be arrogant than before. It was just that whether or not it was enough was another matter. I couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. I shook my head and said, "Stop talking nonsense, and make your move." Lu Xingyang's expression became solemn. He took out a seal from his bosom and looked at it. He seemed to be moved as he said, "When we first fought, I used this Mount Tai seal. In the end, I lost to you. Today, I won't use the silver talisman to bully you. I will use this Mount Tai seal. I want to fight you fair and square." His words stunned me. I almost couldn't believe that Lu Xingyang was going to give up on using the silver talisman. He wanted to use his real strength to fight me. The corner of my mouth twitched. I didn't say anything, and just stared at the yellow Mount Tai seal in his hand. During the Young Phoenix Gatherings ranking competition, I had snatched this Mount Tai seal from Lu Xingyang the first time I fought him. It was only on the day that Lu Xingyang and Lu Zining killed my parents that he snatched it back. Looking at the Mount Tai seal, I seemed to have returned to that despairing afternoon. My father had been kicked by Lu Xingyang to the point of vomiting blood. My mother had been busy in the kitchen because of the false hope that Lu Xingyang had given her. In the end, Lu Xingyang hadn't let them go. The smile on my face grew even wider, but my eyes grew colder and colder. Lu Xingyang even told me to have a fair duel. My duel with him would only be a battle of life and death. There would be no exchange of pointers. Fair duel? To deal with him, even the most despicable methods could be called fair and square. I stood there without moving, but the yin-yang yama brush had already appeared in my right hand. As I guided the energy, I waited for Lu Xingyang to attack. It was almost exactly the same as the first time we fought. Lu Xingyang seemed to be purposely trying to avenge his humiliation. After he used his right hand to guide the Tao energy, he tossed the Mount Tai seal into the air. It transformed into the shape of a small mountain and smashed down towards me. The Mount Tai seal, which was so weak that it couldn't even withstand a single blow, now displayed its might. Not only did the small mountain increase in size, but the aura it contained was similar to the Mount Tai stone that I had seen in the Shenzhen branch. Majestic, true dragon energy coiled around it, bringing with it a suppressive might unique to a magical artifact. It pressed down on me, making me feel like I had nowhere to run. Lu Xingyang stood there and looked at the power of the Mount Tai seal. He seemed to be satisfied and smiled. I smiled as well. Facing the incoming Mount Tai seal, I stood there without moving. Naturally, I would use the same method to deal with his previous attack. After the Tao energy was guided, the yin-yang yama brush instantly appeared. However, what was different from the previous time was that there were 2 dots in the black and white yin-yang fish pattern. I couldn't tell if they were dark green or black. They were hidden in the yin and yang energy and didn't look obvious. However, if anyone stared at them for a while, they would definitely be shocked by the power hidden within. Not only did I use all the Tao energy in my body, but I also used the dark green energy. If Lu Xingyang wanted to avenge his humiliation, he would have to ask for my permission. No matter how strong Lu Xingyang was, he would not be a match for the yin-yang fish with just the Mount Tai seal, which was equivalent to 14 apertures of Tao Qi and 10 apertures of dark green energy. I didn't even look at him. Instead, I slightly turned my head to observe the movements of President Gu and Lu Zining. Nan Gong had said that if the celestial master realm people found out about the dark green energy, they would definitely kill me. Although the dark green energy didn't have the light of knowledge after absorbing all the power from the black bead, the dark green energy was several times stronger than during the Young Phoenix gathering. Hence, I had to be especially careful when using it. I had to use my full power against Lu Xingyang to test the waters. Chairman Gu's face was calm. He sat there like a clay puppet without any expression on his face. Lu Xining's face was filled with worry for Lu Xingyang. He didn't see anything abnormal. I heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the dark green energy was safe for now. I didn't have to worry about it in the future. My attention returned to the battle. At this moment, the giant yin and yang fish finally collided with the Mount Tai seal. Although the Mount Tai seal turned into a small mountain, it wasn't as big as the spinning yin and yang fish. After the collision, there was no sound. The Mount Tai seal was directly covered by the yin and yang fish. Then, the Mount Tai seal only struggled for a few seconds before it stopped moving. Then, its body shrank, and it turned back into a seal. It was obvious that Lu Xinjiang had lost control of the Mount Tai seal. From the start until now, everything was exactly the same as the previous battle. This was what Lu Xinjiang was after. He wanted to recreate the process and pursue a different result. However, it was a pity that the final result was the same as the previous time. At this moment, Lu Xinjiang couldn't maintain the smile on his face anymore. He looked flustered and exasperated as he glared at me. He didn't have any of his previous calmness. I grinned. On the surface, this guy seemed to be much more reserved and calm, but in reality, he hadn't improved at all. Once something happened, he still couldn't control his emotions. Just a small setback would make him look flustered and exasperated. I controlled the yin-yang fish to return in front of me. I extended my hand to retrieve the Mount Tai seal. I waved my hand at Lu Xinjiang and grinned. Brother Lu is too polite. Previously, you took the initiative to give me the Mount Tai seal. Now, you're giving it to me again. It would be impolite of me to refuse. Upon saying that, I kept the Mount Tai seal on my body. Previously, when I took his magic tool, I was a little worried. However, this time, I didn't hesitate at all. Compared to what I planned to do today, the magic tool was nothing. Lu Xinjiang's expression worsened. He couldn't hide his anger and impatience. However, he still forced a smile and said to me, "Last time you took my Mount Tai seal. You won't be able to forget the result for the rest of your life. Are you sure you want to do it again?" I had to say that Lu Xinjiang had made progress. At the very least, he had learned how to infuriate others. The smile on my face froze. After a few seconds of silence, I suddenly grinned at him and shook my head. "I do hope that you can do it again. However, there are some things that can't be redone. It's only been a year and you've only made so little progress." I tried my best to change the topic and erase the scene of my parents' tragic death from my mind. I purposely tried to infuriate Lu Xinjiang. As expected, he was like a bag of dynamite that would explode at the slightest touch. His eyes instantly turned red, and he coldly smiled at me. "Don't think that you can suppress me just because you have Zhang Wenfei's magic tool. If you want to see my progress this year, I'll let you see all you want." After saying that, he chanted, "3 steps, 3 steps, 3 steps, 5 traces of you." This was the second time I had heard these words. It was the Lu family's astral steps. Even though Lu Xinjiang had only reached the pinnacle of his acupoint pressing and relied on the obsidian stone to use the astral steps, its power was naturally incomparable to Lu Qingping's. However, I didn't dare to be careless. I put away the yin-yang yama brush and instantly took out the square, heavenly fan to block in front of me. Then I took out the gold light god talisman and the pure yang god talisman from my bosom. After receiving the Tao energy, I used hand seals and incantations to form a golden light wall in front of me. This was my strongest defense technique. When I faced Lu Qingping, I could resist it for a while. Against Lu Xinjiang today, there wouldn't be any accidents. This was what I relied on the most when I heard Zhang Kunlun say that Lu Xinjiang could use the purple myrtle astral steps. Back then, Lu Qingping could instantly break my 2 incantations, causing my expression to change drastically. However, it was obvious that Lu Xinjiang didn't have that ability today. Even if he had the ability, he didn't have enough star power in his body to squander. For things like obsidian, no matter how extravagant the Lu family was, how much could Lu Xinjiang waste? Moreover, I had already lost my patience to fight against Lu Xinjiang. He wanted to fight me fair and square, but I didn't want to. The only thought in my mind was to end this battle as soon as possible. Thus, after Lu Xinjiang absorbed enough star power from the obsidian stone, he lifted his foot and stepped towards me. I reached into my bosom with my right hand and took out one of the 2 silver talismans that Grandfather Li had given me. However, when I faced Lu Qingping, my 2 divine talismans were able to last until the end. Today, there shouldn't be any surprises. Lu Zhenyang's first step did not seem to work, but his expression was still calm. Without saying anything, he immediately took a second step. He stepped 3 feet in front of the golden ring of flame, and the surging qi of the Wei and the power of the stars came crashing down, but the golden ring of flame only shook slightly and then calmed down again. Lu Zhenyang's expression changed slightly. Without stopping, he took a third step forward. This time, he advanced another foot. The flames on the golden ring of flames seemed to have encountered a strong gust of wind and were pressed down by half their heads. The golden ring of light also seemed to have dimmed a little. I had to admit that the power of Lu Zhenyang's astral steps wasn't bad. Even if he wasn't able to display the full power of the Gangyu's 7 steps, there was still hope for him to completely break my 2 divine incantations. However, my attention had already shifted from Lu Zhenyang's feet to his face. I didn't care whether he could break the golden ring of flame or not. What I cared about was when he would reveal an opening. The stronger the astral steps, the more qi of the Wei and the power of the stars would be consumed. After taking 3 steps, beads of sweat were already flowing down Lu Zhenyang's forehead. How much longer could he last? The moment the qi of the Wei in his body was exhausted, it would be the time for me to use the silver talisman in my hand. Lu Zhenyang's expression turned ugly after the successive blows. He only stood there to recuperate before he immediately took his 4th step. This time, he wasn't as steady as before. His right foot crossed a distance of 2 feet and directly stepped on the flaming golden ring, bringing with it a terrifying gust of wind that extinguished the pure yang flames. It even caused the golden light wall to sink by 2 inches, making it look like it was on the verge of collapse. The power of this step was much stronger than the previous 3 steps. However, after taking the step, Lu Zhenyang's face instantly turned pale. His body that was stepping on the golden light wall seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. This was the sign of qi of the Wei being exhausted. I instantly understood that with Lu Zhenyang's current power, he probably hadn't fully comprehended the Gangyu's 7 steps yet. Hence, he decided to finish it in one go. He wanted to bet all his qi of the Wei and the power of the stars on this 4th step to completely destroy my golden ring of flame. However, it was a pity that he only completed half of his goal. The pure yang flames were extinguished, but the golden light wall was still there. What was even more unfortunate was that he had used up all his power and hadn't generated any new power yet. He was at his weakest. Chapter 256. As expected of a talisman that could only be created by a heavenly master, the speed of the silver spear was too frightening. It was so fast that no one could react. Only when Lu Zhenyang fell heavily to the ground did the crowd below the stage finally let out a suppressed cry of alarm. Even I was slightly stunned. Lu Zhenyang had been pierced by the silver spear. What happened to his life-saving measures? Before I could figure it out, a scorching aura assaulted my face. The huge flame blade was about to reach me. The square heavenly fan appeared in time and turned into weeds on the lonely grave, blocking between me and the huge flame blade. The lonely grave didn't move, but the weeds grew crazily. In a blink of an eye, they grew more than 10 meters and frantically wrapped around the huge flame blade in an attempt to pull it down. However, the power of the huge blade wasn't ordinary. When the weeds wrapped around it, they were instantly burned to ashes. The huge blade's power even caused the weeds on the lonely grave to collapse. However, in that short instant, The power of the wild grass had caused the huge blade to slightly change its trajectory. In the end, it brushed past my face and shoulder, leaving behind a burn mark. Then, it heavily struck the ground behind me, giving off a loud explosion. The power of the giant blade and the flame, which were completely made of Taoist qi, was incomparable to that of ordinary weapons. Although it only brushed my cheek, it still left a horrible wound on my face. It was so painful that half of my face was almost numb. Although a feng shui master's power was strong, his body was still that of an ordinary person. His resistance wasn't much stronger than a normal person's. However, I didn't care about the pain and immediately looked at Lu Xinjiang. There was only one thought in my mind: is Lu Xinjiang dead? When I glanced at him, I saw that the silver spear had pierced through Lu Xinjiang's body. There was a terrifying hole in his chest. He most likely wouldn't survive. However, I didn't dare to believe it before I confirmed it. Even though today's battle wasn't easy, as Lu Xinjiang and I had to use our wits and strength to win, I still couldn't believe it. Lu Xinjiang and the Lu family were like a huge mountain pressing on my head. In the past, I couldn't sleep at night and couldn't see a sliver of hope for revenge. Today, my dream had come true. When my gaze returned to Lu Xinjiang's body, I noticed that his body was wrapped in a thick cocoon of light. He looked just like Lu Qingping. At that moment, I understood that it wasn't that Lu Xinjiang didn't have any life-saving measures, but the power of the silver talisman had exceeded my expectations. Before Lu Xinjiang's life-saving measures could take effect, the silver talisman had directly injured him. After that, his life-saving light cocoon finally took effect. However, when I looked at Lu Xinjiang, I calmed down a little. It wasn't because I was afraid, but because I could see through the cocoon of light that Lu Xinjiang's heart was still beating inside the big hole in his chest. The silver spear had actually passed through Lu Xinjiang's heart and hadn't killed him. As long as Lu Xinjiang didn't die, with the power of the Lu clan, they would be able to bring him back to life. However, this was also good. With the diameter of the big hole, Lu Xinjiang's veins in the sky had been destroyed. Feng shui masters at the pressure point realm would store their Tao energy in the veins of the sky. Even if Lu Xinjiang came back to life, he would only be a cripple. This result made me sigh. Originally, I only had the intention of crippling him. Now that I had accidentally stumbled upon it, the result was really the same as what I had imagined. I didn't care about Lu Xinjiang anymore. I turned around and looked at Lu Zining, who was below the stage. I had made Lu Xinjiang look like this. With the Lu family's temperament, they wouldn't let this go. At this moment, Lu Zining was still sitting in his seat. His eyes were lifeless as he stared blankly at Lu Xinjiang. Only when I looked at him did Lu Zining seem to regain consciousness. His gaze slowly shifted to my body. Then his eyes turned scarlet at a speed visible to the naked eye. He abruptly stood up from his seat and squeezed out a few words. "Brat, you're courting death." Following his voice, I felt a heavy blow to my chest. I spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. I crashed into the wall behind me before falling down. My mind was in a state of blackness. When I struggled to lift my head to look down, Lu Zining was already walking towards the rostrum step by step. I was shocked. I thought that this was the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. Even if I killed Lu Xinjiang, the Lu family would have some misgivings. At the very least, they would wait until I left the Metaphysics Association before attacking me. I didn't think that Lu Zining would attack me so brazenly. What should I do? Gramps promised to protect me, but where was he now? Even if he rushed over, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. Before I could figure it out, the skinny President Gu, who always had a kind face, suddenly appeared in front of me. He blocked Lu Zining, who was already on the rostrum, and said calmly, This is the Metaphysics Association. Lu Zining, don't act recklessly. Lu Zining's footsteps came to a halt, but the scarlet in his eyes did not recede at all. He turned his gaze to President Gu and said coldly, "President Gu, don't speak nonsense. This brat killed a direct descendant of the Lu clan. He deserves death. In a battle, life and death are up to fate. If you want to cause trouble because of this, it won't be justifiable," President Gu said calmly. "Ha ha ha." Lu Zining laughed loudly. His expression became even colder as he continued, "Cause trouble." Just now on the stage, the two of us agreed that we wouldn't use the silver talismans and that we would fight based on our own abilities. This little bastard didn't keep his word and secretly used the silver talisman to harm my grandson's life. Let me ask you, who is the one causing trouble? President Gu was speechless and became silent. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, I struggled to get up and said loudly, "Lu Xinyang did suggest that, but I didn't agree. How can you say that I didn't keep my word?" Lu Zining suddenly turned his head. "Shut up. You have no right to speak here." Following his words, another violent wave of Tao energy came. Fortunately, President Gu waved his sleeves and blocked the Tao energy in Lu Zining's voice, so I wasn't seriously injured. President Gu shook his head. His voice was clearly trying to persuade me. He said, "It's a life and death battle on the stage. How can there be a verbal agreement? Moreover, Lu Xinyang was only injured and didn't die. It's more important to save him. We can discuss this later." Lu Zining didn't seem to notice Lu Xinyang's situation in his rage. When he heard President Gu's words, he turned his head to take a look and hurriedly ordered people to carry Lu Xinyang away. However, he still stood there without moving. After the Lu family took Lu Xinyang away, Lu Zining said to President Gu, "Xinyang has a quasi-3 meridian talent. He's the most talented junior in our Lu family in recent years. He's also the favorite of my elder brother. He's already decided to groom Xinyang to be the next family head. If the Metaphysics Association doesn't give us an explanation for today's matter, our Lu family won't let this matter go." His words were extremely rude. President Gu's tone changed as he asked coldly, "What do you want?" Lu Zining said, "Our Lu family isn't unreasonable. We won't hold the Metaphysics Association responsible for what happened on the stage. However, you have to hand this little bastard over to our Lu family to deal with." President Gu was silent for a moment. What if the Metaphysics Association doesn't want to hand him over? Don't want to hand him over? Lu Zining didn't have any intention of backing down. "If you don't hand him over, our Lu family will withdraw from the Metaphysics Association. Lu Liang's Life family and the Metaphysics Association's branches in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei will also withdraw from the Metaphysics Association." As soon as he finished speaking, most of the people in the venue had a drastic change in expression. The meaning behind Lu Zining's words was very clear. The Lu Liang Life family, the capital, Tianjin, and Hebei branches were all puppets of the Lu family. If these forces were added together, it would be at least a small portion of the Metaphysics Society's power. Lu Zining's words were a blatant threat. President Gu fell silent. After a long while, he said with difficulty, "I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide the Lu family's matters, right?" As soon as he finished speaking, a cold and ethereal voice came from outside the venue. "His meaning is the Lu family's meaning." Everyone in the venue turned their heads at the same time and looked in the direction of the entrance. Following the voice, a skinny old man in a black robe with a long beard walked in step by step from the entrance. His steps weren't fast, but it only took him 2 or 3 steps to reach the rostrum from the entrance and stand in front of President Gu. After he stood still, he said, "Other than the conditions I just mentioned, if the Metaphysics Association doesn't hand over the person, our Lu family will join the Taoist Association from tomorrow onwards. I stared at the skinny old man and felt bitter in my heart. I didn't even need to ask to know that this person was the Lu family's master, Lu Ziyang. The Lu family was in Beijing and was very close to the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. It wasn't surprising that Lu Ziyang rushed over after receiving the news. What was surprising was that his determination to force the Metaphysics Association was stronger than Lu Zining's. Everyone knew that the Metaphysics Association and the Taoist Association had always been competitors. The Taoist Association and the Taoist Association had always been close. All these years, the Taoist Association had been suppressed by the Metaphysics Association because the Taoist Association's main power was in the large sections. However, if the Lu family were to join the Taoist Association, the Metaphysics Association might not be a match for the Taoist Association. President Gu remained silent for a long time and didn't say a word. He turned to look at me and left without saying a word. Lu Zining's face revealed a sinister smile. He waved his hand and shouted coldly, "Bring that little bastard back." As he said that, the Lu family members who had been waiting at the side walked towards me. At that moment, Yi Pianpian suddenly walked over from the side and stood in front of the Lu family members. When the two Lu family members saw this, they extended their hands to push Yi Pianpian away. However, before they could do anything, Yi Pianpian waved the green bamboo flute in her hand and pushed them far away, causing them to fall on the ground. I instantly became anxious. The Lu family members had obviously gone crazy. Even President Gu couldn't protect me, so what could Yi Pianpian do? She even attacked the Lu family members. Lu Zining and Lu Ziyang wouldn't let her go. In a moment of desperation, I was about to stand up, but I was surprised to find that Lu Zining and Lu Ziyang's brows furrowed. Lu Ziyang waved his hand, blocking the two members of the Lu family who were about to stand up and attack Yi Pianpian. He said in a serious tone, "Miss Yi, this has nothing to do with you." Yi Pianpian didn't seem to realize what kind of danger she was facing. A smile appeared on her cold face. She said, "This has nothing to do with me, but it's related to my grandfather. Zhou Yi is my grandfather's new disciple. If you want to take him away, you'll have to ask my grandfather first." Lu Ziyang's expression obviously changed. After a long silence, he said, "Miss Yi, you can't joke about this. I've never heard of the old president accepting a disciple." The smile on Yi Pianpian's face didn't change at all. "Of course I'm not joking. I'm just telling you the news. Now that you know the news, it's up to you whether you want to take Zhou Yi away or not." After saying that, she turned and left the rostrum, leaving Lu Ziyang and Lu Zining standing there. After a few minutes of silence, Lu Ziyang turned to look at me and squeezed out a word with difficulty. "Go." Chapter 257. After the Lu family left, the venue was still abnormally quiet. I also stood there, with my eyes wide open, unable to say a word. The Lu family, who was so strong in front of President Gu, retreated just because of one sentence from Yi Pianpian? Who was this old President Li who had secretly helped me a few times, but never showed up in front of me? Why was Lu Ziyang so afraid of him? Also, what did Yi Pianpian mean when she said that the old president accepted me as his disciple? As I kept thinking about these questions, President Gu returned to the rostrum with a smile. He first announced the result of the match between Lu Zhenyang and me, then turned around and asked me with concern, "How's Mr. Xiaozhou's injury?" President Gu finally retreated under the pressure of the Lu family, but I didn't feel any resentment. As the president of the Metaphysics Society, he naturally had to consider the Metaphysics Society's benefits. He had already done all he could for me. However, the way he addressed me made me feel awkward. I hurriedly stood up and waved my hand. President Gu can just call me by my name. I can't afford to be called Mr. As for my injury, it should be fine after 2 days of rest. Thank you for your concern, President Gu. President Gu stroked his beard and maintained his smile as he said, "The old president's seniority in the metaphysics world is extremely high. He's my elder. Since Mr. Little Zhou is the old president's disciple, you are naturally worthy of the title Mr." I opened my mouth and wanted to say something, but President Gu waved his hand and interrupted me. "Today's match is over. Mr. Xiao Zhou should go back to rest so that it won't affect tomorrow's match." I also had a lot of questions to ask Yi Pianpian, so I nodded at President Gu and walked down the rostrum while enduring the pain in my body. I walked towards Yi Pianpian. When I walked in front of her, Yi Pianpian waved her hand before I could say anything. "Your injury isn't light. Let's go back first." After saying that, she took the lead and walked outside. At this moment, the fatty who was hiding in the crowd to watch the match also ran over. He extended his hand to support me, and we left the venue together. On the way back, I couldn't hold back my curiosity and asked the question in my heart. Doesn't the Liu family have 3 heavenly masters? Why are they so afraid of Grandpa Li? Do you think that Grandpa Li accepting me as his disciple is just a bluff, or is it true? Yi Pianpian answered casually, "Heaven masters also have different levels of strength. The 3 heaven masters of the Liu family are no match for Grandpa Li, so they are naturally afraid of him." Of course it's true. Grandpa Li mentioned this a long time ago. Yi Pianpian had answered the first question perfunctorily, but the answer to the second question made me excited. Does Mr. Li really want to accept me as his disciple? In that case, the people from the Liu clan wouldn't dare to casually deal with me anymore, right? Ever since I stepped onto the path of cultivation, I've always been cautious. No matter what I encounter, the first thing I consider is safety. Even so, I've still encountered many disasters. God knows how much I want to find someone to rely on. If I didn't have so many misgivings, I would have agreed to Han Wenan and Zhang Kunlun's invitation. I was pleasantly surprised. If I really have a heavenly master, realm master, like Mr. Li, I'll be a person with a strong background. When I meet the Liu family or Mount Longhu again, I won't be as cautious as before. When I returned to the small courtyard, I kept grinning like a fool. Yi Pianpian finally couldn't stand it anymore. She angrily said to me, "Why are you so happy? I have to tell you in advance that Grandpa Li isn't reliable at all. Don't count on him to guide you in cultivation. He only has one way to teach his disciple, and that is to let you comprehend it yourself." I waved my hand indifferently. "It's okay. I used to comprehend it myself." Yi Pianpian was even more confused. "Then why are you so happy?" I couldn't help but grin again. I have a backer now. In the past, people always bullied me, but I didn't dare to say anything. In the future, no one will bully me. No, in the future, I'll be the one bullying others. Yi Pianpian frowned and looked at me. It was obvious that she didn't understand what I was thinking. It made sense. She had been with Mr. Li since she was a child. She was a true heavenly daughter. She probably didn't understand what it meant to be bullied. I smiled and shook my head. Changing the topic, I asked, "Since Mr. Li wants to accept me as his disciple, he should at least call me to see him. Is he at home? Can you take me to see him?" Yi Pianpian curled her lips again. "Why are you in such a hurry? Grandpa Li will see you when he wants to see you. You're injured now. You should go back and rest." After saying that, she waved her hand and returned to her room. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, when I got up, I couldn't help but cough as soon as I opened my eyes. I concentrated and carefully sensed my injuries. I found that my injuries were beyond my expectations. The circulation of my Tao energy was a little slow. It seemed that my meridians were also injured. My expression couldn't help but darken. As expected, the might of a heavenly teacher wasn't something that I could easily estimate. I had originally thought that it would only be a few superficial wounds, but never would I have thought that even his meridians were injured. This would most likely affect his performance in the following competition. However, after thinking about it, I understood. I had only participated in the competition to obtain the obsidian stones. Even if I were to withdraw from the competition, I would still be third place. There was no difference between 12 obsidian stones and 10 obsidian stones. After thinking it through, I went to find Yi Piampian and told her about the situation. Yi Piampian frowned but didn't say anything. She only asked me if I wanted to watch the competition today. I nodded. The injuries to my meridians would greatly affect the usage of my Tao energy. However, as long as I didn't use my Tao energy and slowly recuperated, my mind would be better. After I withdrew from the competition today, the final match would definitely be between Han Wenan and Zhang Kunlun. They were the two most dazzling Gemini stars in the metaphysics world. I definitely had to watch this match. After rushing to the Metaphysics Association, Yi Piampian brought me to find President Gu. After knowing that I was withdrawing from the competition, President Gu furrowed his brows. However, he still nodded in the end with a warm smile. He told me to rest well and not to worry about anything else. I understood that to me, there was no difference between 10 obsidian stones and 12 obsidian stones. However, to the Metaphysics Association, there was a huge difference between 100 and 120 obsidian stones. Moreover, Zhou Yu's performance wasn't ideal, and he only obtained the last place. The Metaphysics Association definitely wasn't satisfied with me withdrawing from the competition. Looking at President Gu's forced smile, I couldn't help but feel happy. If it was in the past, the Metaphysics Association definitely wouldn't be so easy to talk to. However, now that I had the backing of Grandfather Li, everything was different. After saying goodbye to President Gu, the fatty Yi Piampian, and I leisurely returned to the competition hall. After asking around, I found out the rankings of the people who had been eliminated yesterday. Li Yanqing lost to Su Kuan of the Su family of Jinling and was ranked 5th. Lu Xinyang's life and death were unknown, so he directly withdrew from the competition and was ranked 6th. The Lu family had suffered heavy losses this time. Their strength was originally in the top 3, but in the end, they only obtained 6th place. They had lost at least 30 obsidian stones and also lost Lu Xinyang. Now that I thought about it, it was no wonder that Lu Xinyang showed such a decisive attitude towards President Gu. As for that Li Yanqing, although his talisman techniques were miraculous, he had already used up all of his scarlet talismans when he faced Zhang Kunlun. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. No matter how brilliant his methods were, he couldn't display them. However, speaking of Li Yanqing, I remembered Yi Piampian's suspicions towards him that day. At that time, I didn't understand why Longhu Mountain would use such underhanded methods, but now I understood. From the Lu family's performance yesterday, it was obvious that even among the celestial masters, Grandfather Li's status and strength were extraordinary. Although Longhu Mountain had 1,000 years of tradition, the current celestial master Zhang wasn't the Zhang Dowling of the past. It was hard to say how strong he was. If Li Yanqing was really from Longhu Mountain, it proved that Longhu Mountain was indeed afraid of him. However, they weren't afraid of the Metaphysics Association, but of Grandfather Li. I couldn't help but think of what Yi Pianpian had said when Chen Yangting of Longhu Mountain's Xian Altar Hall left. She had said, "I will find Celestial Master Zhang within 2 months for an explanation." At that time, I had thought that Yi Pianpian was just being polite. Now, it seemed that she wasn't joking. While I was thinking, President Gu walked up to the platform and briefly told me about my withdrawal from the competition. Afterwards, he announced the start of the final match between Han Wennen and Zhang Kunlun. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.